Good evening, everyone. Welcome to NTD Tonight. I'm David Zhang. Here are today's top stories. Updates on former President Trump's so-called hush money trial. The full jury has been selected. The FDA is alerting healthcare professionals and consumers that unsafe counterfeit versions of Botox have been found in several states. San Francisco proposing a new law to allow residents to sue grocery stores if they close without giving 6 months' notice. First up, the jury selection process for former President Trump's so-called hush money trial resumed today. The full jury has been selected. Just this afternoon, the full 12-member jury was seated. Juror 8 is a man who is a retired wealth manager. Juror 9 is a woman who says she doesn't follow the news too closely, but gets the New York Times and CNN morning newsletters. Juror 10 is a man who works for an eyewear company. Juror 11 is a woman who works as a product development manager and mainly follows industry-specific news. Juror 12 is a woman who works as a physical therapist and gets her news from New York Times, USA Today, and CNN. One alternate is being seated, and 5 more will be picked on Friday. Trump had this to say outside the courthouse.
I'm supposed to be in New Hampshire. I'm supposed to be in Georgia. I'm supposed to be in North Carolina, South Carolina. I'm supposed to be in a lot of different places campaigning. But I've been here all day on a trial that really is a very unfair trial.
The court will start with the opening statements on Monday, and April 23rd will involve a hearing over gag order violation allegations and possible sanctions. Speaking of former President Trump, a new fundraising committee wants a piece of the action from campaigns using Trump's name or likeness. The committee, called the Trump National Committee JFC Incorporated, sent a letter asking Republican digital vendors to share at least 5% of the funds raised starting April 16th. The letter was first published by Politico. It's unclear how many candidates will agree to this. The letter also warns against misusing Trump's name or logo in fundraising appeals without permission. The committee demands compliance, threatening consequences for vendors who don't follow the rules. The unusual request for a share comes amid reports of President Biden's campaign raking in significant funds. A new bill passed by the House says the Fourth Amendment applies to information obtained through commercial means in addition to traditional searches. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. The measure aims to require the federal government to get a warrant before buying people's private data from third parties. The bill is called the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act. It would extend Fourth Amendment protections to data obtained through commercial means, essentially prohibiting government access without a warrant. Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler said the bill had broad bipartisan support, noting it was approved to move to the floor in a rare unanimous committee vote. In Nadler's words, quote, "If a law enforcement wants to gather information about you, they should first obtain a warrant." Also on Capitol Hill, the House could vote on a set of bills to provide foreign aid and potentially ban TikTok as soon as Saturday. They stand a good chance of passing now that 2 powerful and unexpected allies are uniting behind them. House Speaker Mike Johnson is likely to get the Democratic votes he needs for this new aid package. President Biden is now throwing his support behind the set of bills. They provide a total of about $95 billion for Ukraine, Israel, and the Indo-Pacific, according to the House Appropriations Committee. Johnson says he wants to pass a potential ban on TikTok at the same time. This would keep the platform out of U.S. app stores unless it cuts ties with its Chinese parent company. Some Republican hardliners are trying to remove Johnson from his leadership role, but there have also been some internal discussions among GOP over who could potentially replace him if he can't hang on to his job. Speaking of foreign aid and Israel, has the world forgotten October 7th, Israel's version of 9/11? Kelly Wright traveled to Israel to speak to survivors and hostage family members. They vowed to never forget as they combat anti-Semitism and fight for freedom. Watch Hope for Israel on NTD News Primetime Special April 26, Friday at 10 p.m. on NTD. Public health agencies are warning that counterfeit Botox has been discovered in multiple states and is suspected to be connected to several individuals reporting bad reactions following the injection for cosmetic use. NTD's Christina Crona tells us more on the injection.
The CDC and FDA have launched an investigation into fake Botox, which has resulted in 19 individuals being hospitalized due to bad reactions in 9 states. The affected patients, all women ranging from their mid-20s to late 40s, all reported symptoms consistent with botulism. We spoke with Ebony Bankhead, nurse and owner of Harmony Aesthetics, who shared more details about the adverse reactions the woman experienced from fake Botox.
The symptoms can be a droopy eyelid, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing are all some of the risks that come along with getting counterfeit Botox.
The hospitalized women also reported symptoms such as blurred vision and muscle weakness. Cases have been detected in Colorado, Florida, Illinois, Kentucky, Nebraska, New Jersey, New York, Tennessee, and Washington. According to the CDC, these illnesses occurred in patients who received Botox injections in non-medical settings or from untrained or unlicensed practitioners.
I think it's really unfortunate that some people are willing to risk patients' health to give counterfeit Botox. I think some patients don't know the seriousness or the complications that they could face by jeopardizing their health and getting counterfeit Botox.
Botox uses a purified form of botulinum toxin, which temporarily paralyzes muscles to reduce wrinkles when injected into the face. The CDC noted that in several instances, patients received injections containing products from unverified sources, and how to ensure the safety and quality of Botox.
So I only purchase my Botox from a reputable company. There's no Botox that's purchased online or from a third party. Always want to make sure that you're getting your Botox from the manufacturer so you'll know that it's FDA approved.
The FDA identified several ways to spot counterfeit Botox products, such as looking for lot numbers on the outer carton and vial, checking that the active ingredient is listed as botulinum toxin type A, ensuring that the package indicates 150 unit doses, and verifying that the outer carton doesn't contain non-English language. Ebony advises thoroughly researching your injector. During your first visit, ask questions and insist on a consultation. Important questions include their training source, years in aesthetics, and overall medical field experience. People who suspect counterfeit Botox products are encouraged to file a report with the FDA. Christina Corona, NTD News, Chino Hills.
Residents could sue grocery stores if they close without giving 6 months' notice. At least that's what one proposed law would allow in San Francisco if it passes. NTD's Jason Blair has the details.
San Francisco Supervisor Dean Preston, a Democratic socialist, said in a press release earlier this month that the Grocery Protection Act is a resurrection of a proposed law from 1984. Back then it passed the board but was vetoed by then San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein. Feinstein said the law was, quote, an unnecessary intrusion of governmental regulatory authority. However, Preston said, quote, it was a good idea in 1984, and it's an even better idea now. Our communities need notice, an opportunity to be heard, and a transition plan when major neighborhood grocery stores plan to shut their doors. Meeting the food security needs of our seniors and families cannot be left to the unilateral backroom decisions by massive corporate entities. The law was co-introduced by Board President Aaron Peskin. J. Connor Ortega, who is running for supervisor in Peskin's district, is against the law.
Instead of addressing the problems as to why the businesses are leaving, they just throw their hands to business. You know what? We'll just throw our businesses under the bus and say, no, you cannot leave. And if you do, you'll pay the consequences.
Ortega said if the supervisors focused more on fixing the problems surrounding why businesses are closing, then the legislation would not even be talked about today.
They're leaving because people are attacked constantly. Employees are harassed, they're threatened.
In 2023, Whole Foods closed their flagship store in San Francisco after being opened just over a year, with crime, drug use, and unsafe conditions for employees and patrons cited as major reasons. In January, a Safeway in the city announced plans to close in March of this year. However, after pushback from Preston and others, Safeway delayed its plans until January of 2025. Preston called it a major victory for the local community the store serves.
I remember Safeway in the Fillmore was threatening to leave because of the chaos that was retail theft and all that surrounding it. And Mayor Breed had stepped in to have a conversation around policing and getting more officers out in the force, which garnered Safeway to actually change their minds and decide to stay. Well, that's not the same situation that all businesses can have, especially your typical mom and pop shops.
According to Preston, the law would require grocery stores to give 6 months' notice prior to closing and to hold a meeting with community members. It would also require the city to explore a replacement supermarket at the closing location. Jason Blair, NTD News.
We'll take a short break now, everybody, but here's a look at what we have for you when we come back. A Southern California city sued over new voter ID laws. The city attorney shares more on the current situation. A recap of this year's Boston Marathon, who came out on top, who stood out for their determination during the 26-mile run. Those stories and more coming up on NTD Tonight. Welcome back to NTD Tonight. I'm your host, David Zhang. The city of Huntington Beach in Southern California passed a new legislation for election integrity. Voters agreed to require presenting voter identification in order to vote starting in 2026. The law would also allow the city to facilitate 20 more in-person polling locations and monitoring of ballot drop boxes. But state officials are suing the city, claiming it will make it harder for minority groups to vote. For discussion, NTD's David Lamb spoke with the city attorney, Michael Gates, of Huntington Beach.
Michael, now the Attorney General Rob Bonta says that this voter ID law is suppressing voters. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, there's absolutely no design or intent by the city, by the voters who approved these measures on March 5th, to have any effect like that. And more importantly, really, he says that basically is sort of a hollow claim because there's no empirical data at all to support that if you have voter ID, there will be voter suppression. There's no empirical data. In fact, as you look to Georgia, where they updated their elections laws, including requiring voter ID, or other states that have voter ID, their actual voter participation has increased. So there's no empirical data to support what he's saying. I just think it's more hollow bluster. He also claims that it's illegal. It's contrary to state law. That, too, is absolutely not true. It's actually consistent with state law. And as a charter city in Huntington Beach, we have the California Constitution as our authority.
So your city just wants voters to show proof of identification at the polls. Why is the state against that?
Well, the state, it may not be their preference as a matter of policy, but as a matter of law, it's perfectly sound. We're entitled to do it. As I said, with Huntington Beach as a charter city is allowed to control its processes and procedures for elections. That couldn't be clearer in law. The city council put it to the voters on March 5th that as a matter of policy and as a matter of voting procedure, should these election integrity measures be implemented, and the city council approved those moving forward to the ballot, and the voters actually approved 54 to 46, I think the margin was. The voters approved to have these measures put in place. So it's baked in at this point. The voters have the final word on this.
All right, Michael, I understand that you're in a separate 3-week trial. We appreciate your time, and thank you so much for bringing your insight onto our show.
My pleasure.
Workers involved in portraying Disneyland's iconic characters claim to have gathered enough signatures to bolster their bid for a union, advocating for better pay and safer working conditions. NTD's Christina Corona has more on the story.
For weeks, the Actors Equity has been engaged in a union authorization card campaign at Disneyland. 1,700 performers from Disney's Southern California theme parks disclosed that they had submitted an election petition to the National Labor Relations Board on Wednesday.
Our bargaining unit includes performers and support staff from the characters and parades departments.
Many cast members shared what they are advocating for.
While I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity to live out my dream, the current conditions are unsustainable. Many of my castmates suffer from permanent injuries, are told that they are replaceable, and are left unpaid when rain disrupts our shifts.
I'm inspired to fight for my colleagues who have been permanently injured due to costumes and unsafe working conditions. I am motivated to fight for better wages on behalf of people who are barely surviving.
She says many hosts work 6 days with constant overtime, and sculpted performers receive only a 40-cent premium. Parade performers are not allowed to be full-time. The workers have formally requested the Walt Disney Company to acknowledge their union. The proposed union would fall under the Actors Equity Association, an organization that currently represents stage performers at Disney's Florida theme parks.
We have been optimistic that Disney would do the right thing and voluntarily recognize the union. As of this morning, Disney has not chosen that path. That's why today, having reached a supermajority of signed authorization cards, we are filing with the NLRB for a union election.
A voting process is anticipated to take place in either May or June. Earlier this week, the Anaheim City Council unanimously voted for the Walt Disney Company's Disneyland Forward plan. Disneyland Forward is projected to produce $1.9 billion in economic output and generate over 7,800 jobs over 4 years through new construction in California. Annually, the plan is expected to yield $508 million and deploy over 3,600 workers through operations. The final vote is scheduled for May 7th. Christina Corona, NTD News.
Another bird flu outbreak, this time in dairy cows. A professor explains why people don't need to worry too much about it.
An outbreak of bird flu detected in U.S. dairy cows has spread to at least 24 herds in 8 states, weeks after the largest producer of eggs in the country detected the virus in chickens. Health officials continue to stress that the risk to the public is low and that the U.S. food supply remains safe and stable.
People shouldn't be worried about our milk supply, and there's really 3 major reasons. The first is that farm management prevents any milk from diseased animals going into the raw milk. Okay. Secondly, even if there was a small amount that went into the raw milk, it would be diluted out because you're mixing milk from many, many different cows. And thirdly, really most importantly, is that we pasteurize our milk, and pasteurization inactivates or kills this virus.
But there's limited information about possible transmission of the H5N1 virus in unpasteurized milk or cheese products, prompting officials to warn consumers about known risks of consuming raw milk foods. Scientists say there's no evidence to suggest that people can contract the virus by consuming food that's been pasteurized or heat-treated or properly cooked.
The other really major reason that people shouldn't be concerned about the food supply is because this is not a virus that is transmitted by foodborne routes. In other words, you shouldn't be able to get sick by eating food that contains this virus.
One person has been infected with the bird flu from cows, a Texas dairy worker who was in close contact with an infected cow. The worker developed a mild eye infection and has recovered. In 2022, a prison inmate in a work program caught it while killing infected birds at a Colorado poultry farm. His only symptom was fatigue, and he recovered.
Coming up next in sports, we're diving into the excitement of this year's Boston Marathon. For a little over 26 miles, runners battled for that #1 spot. NTD's Carlos Reyes has more on the story.
The 128th Boston Marathon was a thrill ride from start to finish, with every division delivering its fair share of excitement. The women's race in particular kept fans on the edge of their seats. Imagine a cluster of top-tier runners, elbows brushing, knees pumping, vying for that coveted spot at the front. Helen Obiri and Sharon Lokedi, representing Kenya, emerged as front runners, showcasing their dominance on the pavement. Obiri eventually made a decisive break, crossing the finish line in a blazing time of 2 hours, 22 minutes, and 37 seconds, securing her second consecutive victory at Boston. Meanwhile, in the men's wheelchair division, Marcel Hug's journey to victory was nothing short of dramatic. Despite a mid-race mishap near the fabled Newton fire station, Hug powered through to claim his 7th Boston Marathon title, setting a new course record with a remarkable time of 1 hour, 15 minutes, and 33 seconds. The men's race saw its own fair share of surprises, with Ethiopian runner Sise Lema dominating the field. His impressive performance saw him crossing the finish line in 2 hours, 6 minutes, and 17 seconds, a whopping 41 seconds ahead of his nearest competitor, Mohamed Essa of Ethiopia. It was a stunning upset for race favorites Evan Chebet of Kenya, who fell behind the pace and finished over a minute behind Lema. And amidst the fierce competition, American standout Emma Bates captivated spectators with her courageous effort. Despite battling a previous injury, Bates led the women's pack for a significant portion of the race, showcasing her resilience and determination on the historic course. This is Carlos Reyes, NTD News.
Stay tuned for China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer coming up next. An over 6,000% spike in illegal Chinese crossings at the border compared to 3 years ago. How's the influx impacting Guam? More details coming tonight on China in Focus with Tiffany Meyer at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's all we've got for you tonight. We'd like you to join us again on NTD Tonight every weekday at 9 p.m. I'm David Zhang. Have a wonderful evening.